Getting ready to do our housing panel, then Alvin Bragg, then Joy Reid. Then y'all gonna go get ready for the dinner tonight. Shh. Let me say this too. A lot of people have a lot of concerns, and I want you to get those concerns to us. But don't run up in the middle of a panel and expect you're going to hand me something and I'm going to read your concern. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. If you see one of the people on our side, it will get to us and we will try to deal with it. But don't think being rude going to make us take you serious, because I think something wrong with you if you ain't got good manners. All right. Let us get ready to bring in. Nothing is more important. Shh. All of y'all, please take that on the side. Yeah. Y'all can do that out in the hall, whatever that is. Nothing is more important than dealing with the issue of housing. One of the things that is killing our community around the country is that people cannot afford to stay where they are and can't afford to go somewhere different. Gentrification is real, affordable housing is real. So even though this is a national conference, we can use New York as an example, and our panel also gives even more of a broad example. I want to spend the next, before I bring on the DA, I want to set the perspective. Someone that we know in Harlem, where our national headquarters is, has done more to work on dealing with the question of affordable housing than any elected official I know. I want him to share some of his expertise that will apply to you in your cities, and then, of course, we that are here from New York. Can I bring on my friend, the borough president of Manhattan, Mark Levine?
Well, hello, NAN. It's great to see all of you. I'm used to speaking at the House of Justice. We got a few more people here today. I want to say something about Reverend Sharpton, who is more relevant and more important and more needed than ever today because of the scale of the crisis that we face in this country, and because so much of the work that he and you and NAN has led over the past 34 years is now under direct assault by a president who is looking to undo the progress that this movement that NAN has made, that leaders like Reverend Sharpton have helped secure. And there's one value that Reverend Sharpton and you have stood up for over those 34 years. It is that if we are to achieve social, racial, and economic justice in this country, we need American business to stand up and do the right thing. And if they don't, we will hold them accountable, and we will use our economic power to do it. And New York City has economic power. You have economic power. We got a pension fund in New York City, $280 billion. We can use that power to hold every company in America accountable as shareholders to say, you can't back down on your commitment to diversity or equity or inclusion or safety for workers or bold climate goals. We're shareholders. We got a right to push back. And who's investing that money for us? We have a right to say the people investing that money for us should also reflect the diversity of this city and this state and this country. It's our money. We want to see diverse leadership in the people who are investing our funds. And you know, we give out contracts in this city. We got a city budget of over $100 billion. $40 billion of contracts given out every year. We have a right to say that you don't get a city contract from New York City if you're discriminating, if you're violating equal employment rules. We have a right to demand that the people getting contracts from the city live up to the values of diversity. We should do that. This is not a political event, but I may be aspiring to be in a role to do something about these things, and I want you to know, and NAN to know, that you have my commitment to be a partner with you in this fight, to hold corporations accountable, that if they want to do business with our city, they have to live up to our values. That's my pledge. I don't know if the Reverend heard that, but you play him the video. I only got like 2 minutes left, and so now I want to talk about the real crisis that brought us to this panel today. The crisis of housing in New York City. That is so bad. I got to give you one number. Every month, I get the average rents in the borough of Manhattan. Do you know that right now, this month, the average rent in Manhattan for a market rate apartment is $5,400 per month? Is there anybody here who can afford those rents? Whoever's paying those rents, they couldn't be bothered to come to the NAN's conference, I'll tell you that. This is a threat, not just to a person making minimum wage. This is a threat to a bus driver, or a nurse, or a social worker, or a teacher who cannot afford these rents. We tell our young people, go out, get a college degree. And then they come back to their community, whether it's Harlem, or Washington Heights, or Brooklyn, and they can't find housing they can afford. We told them to do the right thing. They came back to the city. Maybe they're making a good salary of $50,000 or $60,000. You can't afford the rents I just said at those salaries. It threatens the future of New York City. There's no shortcut. We've got to build more housing, and especially more, say it with me now, affordable housing in New York City. And we must make sure that that housing is affordable to people at the lowest rungs of the economic ladder. We can do this. We got a project in Inwood, uptown Manhattan. We knocked down an old library. We built back a new library. It's right there on Broadway, just north of Dyckman. We built 172 apartments on top of it. These are deeply affordable apartments, a 2-bedroom renting for $680. That's what I call affordable. An apartment in that building, if you get a studio, it's right there on Dyckman and Broadway, renting for $380 for a studio. Now that a young person who's starting out their career can afford. We can do this. We've done it in Manhattan and New York City. But here's the thing. They had applications for those units. I told you there were 172. We had 80,000 people apply. We are nowhere meeting the need. We have to build hundreds of buildings like that, not 2 or 3, all over uptown Manhattan, all over the 5 boroughs of New York City. We have got to find the locations to build. We've got to be creative. To people who say there's no room in Manhattan, I say they're wrong. We got old buildings, like that library, that we can rebuild with housing on top. We got surface parking lots where, if need be, we build a garage on the ground floor, housing on top. We've got to be creative. We've got churches that are coming to us and saying, I've got a parking lot, I want to do affordable housing there. There's a problem. We don't have financing. 300 projects around New York City are waiting in the queue to get financing to build that housing. Here again, our city pension fund can offer a solution. I've called for investing some of our city pension fund in financing affordable housing in New York City. We can do this, and we're going to do this. But we need you guys to step up. Because if we ask generically, do you want housing in New York? Everybody says yes. But as soon as we propose one project on one given block, then people try and stop it. You know what I'm talking about. This happens again and again and again all over New York City. We need to step up as New Yorkers, as advocates for tenants, to say we have got to build more housing in New York City. Are you ready, NAN, for this fight? Are you ready to say we got to build more affordable housing? Are you ready to fight for deeply affordable rents? Are you ready to say it's not enough just to have luxury housing? We need housing that all people can afford. Are you ready to go out there and say we've got to build for the future of New York City? You ready to fight for college students who are coming back, and bus drivers and social workers and teachers who need housing for a future in this city? I know you're ready for this fight because you are the National Action Network. I couldn't be prouder to stand with you. Let's build the housing New Yorkers need. Thank you so much.
Give him a hand, give him a hand. And let me underscore that Mark Levine just said that if he's controller, he is going to make sure that every company that does business with the city of New York has to have a DEI program. Now that's real commitment. Give him a big hand for that. We gonna send that out. Let me also say, you know, when I was very young, just getting started, I became youth director of Operation Breadbasket's Brooklyn, New York chapter when I was 13. And a man that took a liking to me paid for me and my mother to go to the National Black Political Convention in '72 in Gary. Many of you all read about it. I was only 17 then. He wanted me to go, paid my way, and then brought me back the next year to Chicago to Black Expo. And he was one of the great pioneers of black political empowerment. I was honored to do his funeral, the Honorable Percy Sutton, former Manhattan Borough president. His granddaughter is Mark Levine's deputy Manhattan Borough president. Stand up, Keisha. Keisha Sutton. I gotta recognize family. She's family, and her family helped us, and her grandfather helped us with NAN all the way till he got sick. And her father used to give us our radio broadcast on WBLS, Pepe Sutton. Don't ever forget folks that help you when they didn't have to. A lot of folk help you when you're up. You already up then. I need you when I was down trying to get up. And somehow I didn't forget some of those folks. That's why you don't see them honored at Keep. Anyway, let's go on to the housing. Let's hear from some housing experts and people that work in the field. I couldn't think of a better, more qualified moderator to moderate this part. And again, after him, I'm coming and doing Alvin Bragg, and Joy Reid will be with us, and Ben Crump is going to do, we have several attorney generals of different states. We're going to do all that in the next 2 hours and then get ready for tonight. But this brother is a senior fellow and director of the Center for Community Uplift at Brookings Institution, and his work has been important in highlighting the devaluation of black communities and the racial wealth gap. Let's welcome our moderator, Dr. Andre Perry. Give him a hand. Come on, y'all can do better than that.
Hello, sir. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Andre Perry, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk to you about housing, and I'm going to invite up a few folks. First off, on the top, I'm going to invite the Honorable Shaun Donovan, CEO and President of Enterprise Community Partners, an organization that works to create and preserve affordable housing across the U.S. And Oliva is the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, where she leads efforts to reduce homelessness through policy advocacy and collaboration. Lisa Rice, CEO and President of the National Fair Housing Alliance, where she leads the organization's work to eliminate housing discrimination and promote equal housing opportunities. Renee Willis, Interim President and CEO of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. an organization dedicated to achieving socially just housing policies. And last but not least, Dr. Courtney Johnson-Rose. Dr. Rose is president of NAREB, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which aims to advocate for equal housing opportunities and aims to increase Black home ownership. Please give them all a warm applause. Now, most people know me through my work on housing devaluation, but I'm just going to give you a little personal reflection on this. As the story was told to me before I was born, there was a deal made between my maternal grandmother and this older woman in the hood named Elsie Boyd. At the time, my mother was young. She was 15 when she had my brother. She was 17 when she had me. She was 19 when she had my younger brother. My mother was probably abused. She was certainly poor. My father was a heroin addict. He was murdered inside of Jackson State Penitentiary, a little bit outside of Detroit. Now, she raised about 12 to 15 kids for varying durations. Some would stay a few weeks, some would stay a few months. I would stay from birth to the time I graduated from high school. Now, I obviously went on to do a lot of good things in the world, and people always want to point out that, oh, what did you do differently? What did she do differently? And certainly, we did a lot of good things on our own. But the fact of the matter is, she owned a home. She could leverage that asset to uplift an entire community. When things went wrong in that community, they knew who to go to for shelter. They knew who to go to for support. So what we're talking about today is about how to support our communities. Reverend Sharpton, thank you, National Action Network, for hosting this. I can't say that. Give the organization an applause. Why this is so important, it's connected to life itself. I have a book coming out, Black Power Scorecard. Please pick up Black Power Scorecard. You can give that a round of applause. But to save you one of the storylines, we did all this fancy statistical modeling, and what we found is that housing is important on life itself. Yes. It takes years off your life if you don't have affordable housing, home ownership, and a number of other factors. So we're going to get into that today. My first question, and I'm really going to direct this to Renee and Shaun. With many Americans unable to afford and to buy homes, the rental market is becoming even more critical. What steps can be taken to protect renters from skyrocketing rents and potential displacement? And I'm going to start with Renee.
Thank you, Dr. Perry, and hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you, National Action Network. So, great question. I would say, what we're seeing and what we're facing right now, as we all know, is an affordable housing crisis. We heard just a little while ago that, rent is, here in New York City, is off the chain. It's very, very high. So we do a study each year. We look at the housing wage, and it's the amount that you need to make an hour in order to afford a modest two-bedroom rental home. And that's without paying more than 30% of your income. So nationally, the amount is $32.11 per hour. And we all know, in terms of even the federal minimum wage is only $7.25. National federal minimum wage. But in certain states, it's higher. Here in New York, it's higher. And for instance, in New York, it's the housing wage. So in New York, the wage is $15 an hour. But when we look at the expense and the cost of housing, even here in New York, the housing wage that we calculate is $52.92. That is the amount that someone will need to make in order to afford a modest two-bedroom home. And when you look at the number of hours, that is essentially 3.5 jobs that a person would need to have at 40 hours a week.
Some of you got 3.5 jobs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's having to work 140 hours per week. And y'all, there are only 168 hours in the week. So it leaves no time. And so what's happening is that we really have to pay attention to that gap, the gap between incomes and the gap between the cost of housing, which is substantial. And so one of the things that we are looking at very closely is making sure that, it's in terms of the federal investment in affordable housing, that, we need universal housing assistance for those who need it. Universal housing assistance. And that would entail the Congress making a substantial investment in housing, because we know that housing choice vouchers, Section 8, it works, and we have a lot of research that shows that it works, and it helps in terms of the stability of homes. And when you have stability, it's all of those, the things that come about it in terms of families are able to thrive, education outcomes are higher, health outcomes are higher as well. So I would say that in answer to your question, that's one of the things that we would certainly need to fight for at the federal level, and that's universal housing assistance.
Now, Shaun, I want you to pick up on that, because there are two factors there that were mentioned. There's income, and then there's the rising housing costs. Can you pick up on how to protect renters on both sides of that equation?
Absolutely, but let me first say, Andre, I do know somebody who works 3.5 jobs. His name is Reverend Al Sharpton.
Yeah, that's right.
So right? 140
right.
hours a week, no problem. Does he sleep? I don't know, but
that's right.
And I will say it is wonderful to be back. I was here every year as HUD Secretary for President Obama. Took a couple years off, and I am very, very glad to be back, even though we're facing a very different Washington, D.C. right now, and I know we'll come back and talk about that. Very different. But just building on what Renee has said, and stepping back, there was a time in this country where a child didn't have a right to a public education. We fixed that. There was a time in this country before President Obama where we didn't have a right to health care. We fixed that. But of all the necessities in life, as you said, Andre, the basic need for housing, a roof over your head, a decent place to raise your family, is the single most important in my view, and the most expensive. And 1 out of 4 people in this country whose incomes would qualify them for housing assistance actually gets it. That is different from just about anywhere else around the globe. And that is something that we need to fix. And I do think, despite all the craziness we're seeing in Washington, D.C. right now, this moment is a moment when the housing crisis has never been worse. I grew up in New York. I started working in the South Bronx 30 years ago on housing. We always had a housing problem in New York, but everywhere around this country now, you go to rural communities, you go to Native communities, you go to just about every state, red states, blue states, we have the worst housing crisis that we've ever recorded. And now is the time to build the movement for this help. So one is we do need, as you said, Andre, to raise incomes and make sure that everybody can afford it. But the other problem we have right now, to pair with what Renee said, is we don't have enough housing. And we particularly don't have enough housing in communities that for too long have shut out low-income people, they've shut out black and brown people, and it is time that we have to make sure that we are building more housing everywhere. We're 7 million housing units short in this country of what we need to make housing affordable. And that is a fundamental reason that we are falling further behind on housing affordability right now. And we need to make sure that not just at the federal level, which we'll come back and talk about, but at the state and the local level, we're making progress. And that's why recently the city, they did something called the City of Yes, right? Which is saying every neighborhood has to contribute to the solution. Every neighborhood should be part of building more housing, and particularly affordable housing.
Yeah, you can clap that up. Lisa, I want you to pick up on that. When we do build affordable housing, it typically is in already struggling neighborhoods.
Correct.
divorced from the opportunities in the job market, educational options, and the like. How can we shift policy so that we can make sure that we build in areas of high opportunity?
Andre, thank you for that question. It's a question that we've been deliberating and grappling with for quite some time. Look, where you live matters. Your zip code determines almost every single thing about you. If you give me your address, I can tell you your educational attainment. I can tell you your children's chances of graduating from college. I can tell you your health outcomes. I can tell you how much money you're going to make. If I know your address, I can tell you your credit score. Yeah. I can tell you how long you're going to live just by knowing your address. And that is because residential segregation in the United States, which is not a natural construct, we are segregated by design. We are segregated because of discriminatory policies, apartheid policies that have been put in place in this nation over the centuries. But segregation means that place is inextricably linked to opportunity. Not every community has access to healthcare facilities, healthy grocery stores. And in fact, some neighborhoods have much more higher concentrations of pollutions and toxins than do other neighborhoods. I'm reminded of a community in Mobile, Alabama called Africatown. You all know the last slave ship that came to the United States of America illegally in 1860, the Clotilde. Well, the enslaved people who came over on that slave ship established a community called Africatown in Mobile, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Now, where those people live in Africatown is right adjacent to something called the chemical corridor. That means that the chemicals that are emitted from all of the industrial complexes that are situated in and around Africatown have been contaminating the land, air, and water of that community for decades and decades. As a result, today, people who live in Africatown have the lowest health outcomes than any other community in the entire state of Alabama. And Africatown has the highest level of pollutants than any other neighborhood in the state of Alabama, right? So that has real outcomes for people. And what the question that Andre teed up is so important because oftentimes we find low-income housing or subsidized housing units being placed in those kinds of areas and communities. But there is a provision in the Fair Housing Act, the Federal Fair Housing Act. It is called the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Provision. It requires municipalities to build affordable housing in areas where there are ample opportunities, where you don't have high levels of pollution and toxins, but we need our elected officials to enforce that law and abide by that law. And Andre, I would say that is the number one solution. If we can get our officials to just follow the law, then we would have affordable housing built in communities of opportunity and in communities where people can thrive.
You know, and you clap that up. And homelessness is a manifestation, some of it, of people not following the law. And
That's right.
Also. But so many factors come together when you're talking about homelessness. What can be done in the affordable housing space to ensure that people have a stable place to live?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, and thank you to Reverend Sharpton for having me. I actually thought that the invitation maybe was fake when I got it. I was so excited about it. So thank you so much for having me today and for raising homelessness as a housing issue, because so often communities and the national organizations for many years in the past looked at homelessness as a standalone issue that wasn't really related to housing. And what we know is that the failure of many, many systems across this country, whether it's the child welfare system or the criminal legal system, the fact that only 25% of people who are eligible for Section 8 housing can access it, that we don't have enough affordable housing in this country, and that the wage gap is getting bigger and bigger. All of those things, as you astutely said, contribute to homelessness. And last year, at a specific point in time in January, 771,000 people were homeless in this country. That was an 18% increase from the year before, which was a 12% increase from the year before. This problem is getting worse because those systems do not serve the people who need it. And one of the things I would have added to the conversation around the first question was we also don't have any sort of structure to prevent people from becoming homeless in this country. During the pandemic, we had a very successful program called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. When that ran out, it was not made permanent by Congress, and there's a lot of work to do there. But the core of the question is what solves homelessness? And the answer is incredibly simple. You've already heard it from everybody on this panel, and that is safe and affordable housing that is accessible for folks solves homelessness, period. That's the thing that solves homelessness. People also need services that they can access, that are not forced upon them, that can help them with their health care or any of their behavioral health needs, like addiction or mental health. They need job training. But all of that packaged together, the housing plus the services, is the way that we end homelessness in this country.
Now, I just want to stay with you real quick because often the barrier to creating solutions in this regard comes from everyday people because they don't want to live next to people who may have a drug problem, who may have a mental health problem. How do you bridge these sort of disagreements between communities that ultimately end up preventing the kind of housing solutions that help this population?
Yeah, that's actually a really important point. And I'll start with saying this. We did not get into this situation in 2 years. It is going to take us time to get out of this situation, this continuous increase in the number of people who are experiencing homelessness. And you all know, as well as I do, that marginalized people are overrepresented in the homeless population. So that's Black and Indigenous people and people of color, LGBTQ people, people with disabilities are all overrepresented in that population of people experiencing homelessness. And when I say it's going to take us some time we need to build housing. We need to get Congress to do the right things. And in the meantime, we have to, as communities, have interim programs in place, interim strategies in place to keep people as safe and healthy as possible. And when I say people, I mean housed people and unhoused people. All people have to be kept as safe and healthy as possible. So we have to work with our local elected leaders to make sure that resources are in place to help us bridge the gap between the problem that we have now and the thing that's going to solve it, which is safe and affordable housing and access to services. And then one last thing that I want to note here. It is really easy for elected officials to say, I'm going to fine, ticket, or arrest my way out of this problem and pretend like that will solve it. And we all know that that does not solve anything, and in fact, it makes it worse for the people that are subject to being fined, ticketed, or arrested simply because they do not have a place to lay their heads at night. That cannot be our solution, and we have to hold our elected leaders accountable for those kinds of decisions if they're being made in community.
Now, before I get into a homeownership section, I want to talk about housing discrimination. I want to have you respond to this, Rose. Discrimination is it's sad to say, it's part of the American fabric. America has a longer history being able to discriminate against Black people than it has one to include them in property ownership, in business ownership, in participation in democracies. Can you just reflect on the need to end discrimination in everyday policy, and also just maybe talk a little bit about the discrimination that we've grown accustomed with. Single-family zoning ordinances and other things like that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perry. Let me also say thank you to Reverend Al Sharpton and NAN for inviting NAREB for the second year in a row to be a part of this important discussion. So I want to first just mention something on housing, and former HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge shared this with NAREB the last time she was with us when she was secretary, and that is the fastest growing demographic for homelessness is Black women in their 60s.
That's right. That's our elders.
When you think about that, you think about our mothers, our aunties that have worked all their life but are on a fixed income but cannot afford housing. So when you put your arms around that, that's who we're talking about. In a lot of cases, I think that we have to put a face on affordability and what that really means. This is your child's aid that's in their classroom every day with your child. When you go to the doctor and somebody draws your blood, this is the phlebotomist that's drawing your blood. This is the manager at the fast food restaurant that you pass through every other day. So I think a lot of this with NIMBYism and people not wanting affordable housing in their community is not really putting a face on it. But to really describe racism and systematic racism and what it has done and why we have what has led to the situation that we're in now, I want to just share a quick story. And that is a study that was done in Seattle. And it was of two families, a white family and a Black family. The study was from 1976, which was the last year in Seattle that redlining was legal. And it traced these families from 1976 to 2005. So the white family was able to purchase a home because it was legal for them. They were able to get a loan. The couple purchased a home. A couple of years later, they had kids. They had a boy, they had a girl. They lived in that home, they enjoyed that home, their kids grew up in that home. It was time for their kids to go to college. They were able to take out a home equity loan for their kids to go to college. So both their kids went to college, paid for by their parents through the home. The kids graduated from college. Parents did what they usually do. They decided to downsize. At this time, they had owned the home for almost 30 years. So now the home's almost paid off. They've paid off the home equity loan. They sell that home for 3 times as much as they bought it for in 1976. And they're able to buy a brand new townhouse downtown, energy efficient, et cetera, et cetera. They bought that cash because they had so much equity in their home. Their son comes, graduates. Son says, I'm getting married. They said, great, son, we want to support you and your new wife. They give him 20% down payment, because remember, they have a nice nest egg. They gave him 20% down payment for him to purchase his first home. Daughter comes along, she says she's getting married too. Parent says, great, we have the funds and the resource to give you a beautiful wedding. That's the white family. They have, at 2005, they had a net worth of $750,000 starting from that one house. Now let's go back to the Black family. So the Black family in 1976 was not able to receive the home loan because of redlining, which was legal at that time, that said that they could not get access to a mortgage. So that family, they were a Black couple that got married. They weren't able to buy a home. They had 2 children like most people do. But they were able to finally buy a home 9 years later. Took them that long because now you have kids, it's harder to save to get to that point. But 9 years later, guess what? They have to spend $100,000 more for that same house because guess what? Every year, real estates get higher and higher. But nonetheless, they still purchased a home. Now it's time for their kids to go to college. Well, wait a minute, they just bought the house 5 or 6 years ago. They bought the house for $100,000 higher, so they don't have the equity in their house to send their kids to college. So their kids do go to college, but their kids go to college, and their kids have to get student loans to go to college because they don't have the equity in their house. Son graduates from college, daughter graduates from college. The couple has to decide, do we try to pay this house off that we're in because we're only halfway done paying for it now, or do we try to sell it but we don't have enough equity to sell it and buy something else? So that family decides that they're going to hunker down and try to pay that house off. But now they have, it's poor energy quality because it's an older house. And I remember it's 1976 house. They got to change the roof. They got to change the air conditioner. They got to change the windows, all those things that go along to get them ready for retirement. The son comes along and says, I'm getting married. The family is trying to pay their house off and get it energy efficient and ready for retirement. They can't seed into the son's purchase of a home. The daughter's getting married. They can't seed into her getting married. So they both have student loan debt, their children, and wedding debt. We do that in our community. So now you look at the black couple's net worth is $75,000 compared to the white family's net worth of $750,000. But where did it all start? In 1976 with that one house. So when we talk about systematic racism, we have to realize that this is years and generations of racism that has gotten us.
That's right. That's right. You know, and I have to chime in here. You know, most people know me through my research on housing devaluation. In 2018, we did a study where we compared homes in black neighborhoods to homes in white neighborhoods. And we attended to education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics, because we wanted to get an apples-to-apples comparison. And what we found is that homes in black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Cumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity in our communities. And I just always put that number in perspective because $156 billion, what does that mean? $156 billion would have financed more than 4 million black-owned businesses based upon the average amount black people use to start their firms. It would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees based upon the average amount of a four-year public education. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan 3,000 times over. Would have covered nearly all of Hurricane Katrina damage. It's double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. It's the way people pay for fertility treatments. If you're wanting to run for public office, you draw upon the equity in your home. This is why I say that there's nothing wrong with black people that ending racism can't solve. There's things that are done every single day to black communities without anyone carrying a tiki torch or wearing a white hood.
Yeah. Yes.
It's the everyday discrimination that we've seen over and over again. Now I want to turn to Shaun and Lisa, and we have to actually do speed round here.
Oh, wow.
Because there's a couple things. One, I want to know, are there mechanisms to convert renters to homeowners? Is that a possibility, even in places like New York, where the vast majority of folks are renters? Is it possible to do that? So, Shaun?
Yes, it is. But given everything you just heard up here, we don't have nearly enough money or focus on it right now to do it in a big... So think about this. The number one thing we spend money on as a country in housing is tax breaks for home ownership. But guess what? Who gets those tax breaks? Well, after the Trump tax law changes in his first term, if you're a renter who's on the verge of maybe saving up and being able to buy that first home, you don't make enough money to itemize on your taxes, and you don't get that benefit. So we basically have a system, given all the history you just heard, that is equivalent to wealthy folks getting in the castle and pulling up the drawbridge to those folks who want to get across that drawbridge into home ownership, right? Because we spend money as a country subsidizing home ownership for people who already own homes. That's basically the way the system works. So what could we do? We have a tax bill that's going to make its way through Congress this year. People care about home ownership. They could say, guess what? We're going to turn that deduction for mortgage interest into a credit. What does that mean? No matter what your income, if you're paying taxes, you can benefit from paying your mortgage. That would be a number one thing that could really, really scale up the potential. So that's one thing. The second thing is recognizing that we absolutely have to create more homeownership. We also have to find other ways to build black wealth.
That's right.
How do we do that? One, My organization, Enterprise, we're the largest affordable housing nonprofit in the country. We created something called the Renter Wealth Creation Fund. You're a renter in one of our buildings for a number of years. You get a part of the profits when that property is sold or refinanced, right? Why shouldn't renters participate in that value that's created? We also, think about this. 1 out of every 200 developers of housing in this country is Black or Latino.
Correct.
That needs to change. We've created a program called Equitable Path Forward. We've provided $3 billion to over 100 developers of color to get into the game, to start building wealth as in real estate, as owners and managers of affordable housing. That's got to change as well. So I am all for more home ownership, but we have to find lots and lots of ways to build wealth in this country that will get us to the scale that we need to overcome the historic disadvantage everybody here has talked about.
No, I'm gonna have to not allow that question to go to you, but I am going to allow for each of the panelists to close out with a solution on creating advancement in terms of housing in your sector. So I'll start with you, Lisa.
Thanks, Andre. So let me just say, I wanted to share with you all because I don't want you all to be defeated. I don't want you to leave here defeated. I want you to leave here on an up note. And I want you to know that when we fight, we win. What we're hearing in the news every single day is attack after attack, and in fact, it's unprecedented. It's an unprecedented level of attacks on civil and human rights that we're experiencing in this country. And so we're doing a number of things at the National Fair Housing Alliance. We don't have time for me to list all of them, but I do want to leave you with a couple of things that we have done and a couple of wins that we have received just this week. So we're continuing with our work of fighting housing discrimination, filing housing discrimination lawsuits, and winning. Just this week, we won a major decision in a lawsuit that we have filed against one of the biggest banks in the world, Deutsche Bank, for discriminating against Black and Latino homeowners and Black and Latino communities during the foreclosure crisis. Just won a major decision in that case this week. We sued the Trump administration and DOJ and HUD because they cut half of the fair housing grants in the United States of America illegally. We just won that this week. We also sued DOJ and the Trump administration over the executive orders, the anti-diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility executive orders. Our colleague, the Lawyers Committee, filed a similar lawsuit. They just won a preliminary injunction this week. We're waiting to hear from the judge in our case. So I just want to leave you with this. When we fight, we win, and we are fighting and we are winning.
Amen. Okay, I swear you're getting me jokes. So literally 20 seconds each, 30 seconds each. Go.
Okay. I do want to invite everyone to the NAREB Building Black Wealth Tour. So NAREB is going on tour. We're going on tour. We'll be in 100 cities, April 12th, 2025. Next weekend, we have 4 Black Wealth tours here in the New York area: Brooklyn, Queens, Bed-Stuy, New Jersey, etc. Go to NAREBBlackWealthTour.com. The reason why this tour is so important is because our tour is about inspiration, education, fair housing, housing counseling, credit repair, all the things that you need to get you on the track to home ownership. NAREBBlackWealthTour.com. Please come out and be educated.
And 10 seconds.
What? 10? It's getting shorter.
You can do it.
I have a long list, except that I'm going to say these 2 things. We are not complying in advance, and we are holding our partners to not complying in advance. We are trying to change the narrative around all of these issues, in my case specifically around homelessness, and we are pushing the boundaries of what that means at the community level. Look for new commercials from the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
Renee, and I'm going to say, Shaun, you already closed out.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. So I'll say this, hands-off housing, because what we know right now is that Doge and Elon Musk, they are trying to decimate HUD. And all the programs we talked about, all the things that we need for housing that we just spent an hour talking about, will be no more if they decimate HUD and in the way that they're trying to. And they're trying to lay off staff. So we need to, and you need to send a strong message to your members of Congress for Doge and Elon Musk to keep their hands off housing. So please contact your members of Congress, let them know, because as Lisa just said, when we fight as a collective, we win. So when we fight, we win.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Have a good evening.